So, good morning, everybody. ECRIN, the Integrated Services for Infectious Disease Outbreak Research Project, welcomes you to the webinar on access to regulatory and clinical preparation support at no cost for projects in infectious diseases. Jointly organized by two research infrastructures, the European Infrastructure for Translational Medicine, EATRIS, and the European Clinical Research Infrastructure Network, ECRIN. I'm glad to present you the two speakers, Dr. Sarah Ratha-Khan, she is a project manager at ECRIN, and Dr. David Morrow, who is a senior scientific program manager at EATRIS. I'm Patricia Carvajal, scientific project manager at EATRIS for ISIDORE, and will be moderating the questions and answer section. We ask you, please put all your questions in the Q&A and do not chat, please. Add them as they arise, and we will address them at the end of the session. We have lots of time to address any questions you may have. Now, I leave the floor to Sarah.
Thank you, Patricia. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar as we take you through our services in the context of ISIDORE. So just a brief context on ISIDORE, why it came into being. So as we all know, there was the COVID-19 pandemic, and at that time, there was a crucial need to have higher capacity for preparedness and response to a pandemic and epidemic-prone pathogens in Europe and also worldwide. And in response to this, this project was conceived to strengthen Europe's ability to prevent, detect, and respond better and more rapidly to health emergencies. And in this context, ERA also has the support of the European Health Emergency and Response Authority. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I'm trying to move forward. Just a second, please.
So this is just a short background on ISIDORE that started in February 2022. So we are midway in the project. We are talking about funding of around 21 million. We have over 300 services from 17 research infrastructure partners and 154 research entities and academic organizations which are grouped together in ISIDORE to provide services to you in 32 countries. So next slide, please.
Sorry for the delay, but something's happening with my keyboard.
So here we will just start how the project is working, how you can apply for it. So ISIDORE is about supporting preparedness and response to the pandemics. And you can have free access to research resources, services, and expertise through an integrated and comprehensive portfolio of high quality research services. These services vary from structural biology to clinical trials, and they support user projects. And we hope that they will support your projects. So this access is provided through calls. The project has certain calls which are open that my colleague David will share with you later on. And these calls are given in a transnational access mechanism, and we will explain this to you a bit later. The eligibility would be that all researchers, public and private, they're eligible to apply. Calls are open worldwide as long as the funding is available in the project. If you're highly encouraged to apply, if you're a young researcher, if you are from a small and medium sized enterprise, you're encouraged to apply for these services. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is the transnational access model that is being used by this project to provide services to you. And here, as compared to a standard funding model that you see on your left, we are using the transnational access funding model, which means that the funding would not, once you apply to the call for proposals from the project's website and your project is approved, then the funding would be not provided directly to the researcher or the group of partners who are conducting the research, but it would be provided to the research infrastructures that are part of this project, and we will provide to you services free of charge. So this is the transnational mechanism. And also another aspect is that you are encouraged to apply for services which are not available in your own country, and that you would apply within the other for those services in the other European countries. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I think that's over to me. Thank you, Sarah and Patricia, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted that you could take time to find out about this fantastic opportunity for you. So as Sarah mentioned, the TNA services an applicant like you applies for must be in line with one of the ECRIN open calls. So currently we have several open preparedness calls that address respiratory pathogens, vector-borne pathogens and their vectors, and other pathogens with epidemic potential. Now, these will remain open while funding lasts. We did have previous open calls, what we refer to as rapid research response calls for COVID-19 and Mpox, which have now closed. That is probably a good sign, but we remain open to other potential calls depending on the times and what threats we face. Next slide. So here you will see a detailed list of the different preparedness pathogens that we welcome TNA service requests from you. I won't list them out, it is quite comprehensive, but we believe that it covers the critical pathogens that currently demand such a dedicated preparedness program. This, of course, as I mentioned, can change as we continuously strive to be proactive against different pathogens of epidemic potential. Next slide. So what are the type of specific services that ISIDORE currently provides? Well, on this slide, you will see different categories that you can review on our website for more details and explore the specific service types that reside within those categories. These services, they range from cell models to in vivo models to analytical services and more. I have highlighted specifically here immune monitoring services, as this is an additional service group provided by EATRIS and our partners, which include ARENA, Eurobioimaging, Infrafrontier, and VetBionet, that can provide you, the researcher, state-of-the-art services for deciphering the immune response. This includes, for example, detection and characterization of immune tissues and cells, detection and characterization of the immune response, modulation of immune gene expression, and bioimaging for immunoprofiling. So I would highly recommend that all of you on this webinar today and your collaborators firstly try and familiar yourself with our ISIDORE catalog and try and identify key research services that could support your development programs. In addition to classic lab services that we have here on the screen, we also have comprehensive regulatory support. And this is to support the development of your therapeutics, your vaccines and diagnostics that all require and demand sanity checks and support under the regulatory banner. So Sarah from ECRIN will now walk you through the specific ECRIN offering and some support that they can provide you. Next slide.
Thank you, David. So now we will talk a bit more about ECRIN and also how we provide services to you through the ISIDORE. So ECRIN's mission is to support sponsors and investigators to conduct multinational clinical studies. We are a distributed research infrastructure. I will explain a bit later what that means. We are working from 13 member and observer countries and covering more than 360 million EU citizens. And this network involves more than 120 clinical trial units that I will talk about in the next slide a bit more. And so far, since ECRIN came into being, we've supported more than 70 clinical studies. And we are also working on more than 50 infrastructure projects. Next slide. So this is the detail of how we work. So we have this central coordination team, which is based in Paris. So the host country is France. And then we are working with a network of partners in 13 member and observer countries. And I've put some of their logos on the right. And in these countries, we have European correspondents. These are ECRIN staff members, which are based in these member and observer countries. And they work closely with the partners, which are listed to your right. And within each of these countries, we further work with the research entities, which are called clinical trial units. And they're also our national partners. They have in-depth information of how clinical research is conducted within a particular country, what are the laws, local regulations, the ethics requirements that apply to that country. And so it allows us to work on research proposal based on not only European priorities, but also national regulations and laws. And within each country, the number of CTUs, the kind of arrangements they have, how they're organized, how they receive their fundings, that can vary based on one European country to another. And the number of clinical trial units that ECRIN can have within a country can also vary depending on the research scenario in a country. It can be 4 or 5 in one country and more than 20 in another. It can vary. So next slide, please. These are the ECRIN services that we provide in general. And on your left, you see highlighted the ECRIN services in EASIDORE. So this is basically how we help you with the clinical study right from the start to the operational coordination and management of a clinical study, which is on the right, but this is outside of EASIDORE. So within EASIDORE, the services that ECRIN is providing free of cost, this is from when you start having an idea about a clinical research project that you want to do on the pathogens that David already explained, the pandemic and epidemic prone causing pathogens, all of those. If you have any research proposals, you can get in touch with us. And from the start of the idea, that means that this means just that you can call us by email, by telephone, you can contact us, and we can define together the roles and responsibilities, what is this funding source or the scope of your application, the eligibility for ECRIN support. So this would be like from the start of the idea, that would be the general information. And then to develop further your research proposal, there's the whole planning and design phase where we can work on the trial design and methodology. It can depend from one research proposal to another. It could be the regulatory, ethical, and insurance requirements for your trial. The local ethics that apply in one country can be very different than what is applicable in another country. And that's where our regional nodes or our country nodes are very important. Of course, this can also be related to the funding application support, the cost evaluation for your research proposal, a protocol peer review, or strategies for site selection or patient recruitment. Any services which are for the operational management of the trial, as I said, would be outside of EASIDORE, and you can contact ECRIN separately for those services. But these services are free of cost and available on the catalog of services on the EASIDORE website. And apart from this, the overarching service which would be provided would be, of course, a risk assessment of the feasibility of your research proposal, any strategies for mitigation, and the resources that could possibly be tapped into. And the overarching expertise, overarching support and expertise that could be provided to sponsors and PIs throughout the maturation and execution of their ideas. So thank you. So as a researcher, if you would like to apply for ECRIN services through the catalog of services, so our services support to clinical studies, as already mentioned, if you are an investigator, you're a sponsor, you're a young researcher and you want to develop a multinational clinical research proposal on any of the pathogens that we are talking about today, you can reach out to us, and you can reach out to us with your proposal. That means applying through any of the 4 calls through the EASIDORE website. We will receive your application and we will get back to you, maybe to ask you a bit more details about what you would like to achieve the objectives of your research. And then we can guide you based on what kind of service you require. It could either be guidance in planning and design of your clinical research proposals. It could be an advice on the trial methodology or the optimal trial design. Next slide, please. And again, linked to planning and design, it could be itself the encompassing regulatory ethical requirements in the countries that you want to work on, because we are talking about transnational access projects. So that means that you can do research in a number of European countries, and then it would encompass regulatory and ethical requirements of those individual countries, the informed consent that can vary from one country to another, so country-specific information on those aspects. Data sharing is an increasingly important and complex and evolving arena. So here also we can provide you robust data monitoring plans, data management plans, data sharing plans according to the latest European rules and regulations. We can also provide you guidance, expert guidance on funding applications, such as grant proposals. If you've already identified some grants that you want to apply to, we can give you advice on that. We can go over the trial budgets together. We can also possibly identify other funding mechanisms that can allow you to continue your research. And then, yeah, as in all trials, there are many partners, and so task distribution is an important part of management. We can also look at that, and there's a range of open access tools that you can also access through the ECRIN website. So David, over to you. Thank you. Sorry. This was an important, so this is just an example of how we provided TNA services within and outside of EASIDORE. So in EASIDORE, we received a pilot study from, we received a proposal from Cyprus on intranasal interferon beta for cognitive impairment secondary to COVID-19 for eligible long COVID and dementia patients. So we received this proposal and they applied for the service access to European clinical trials. This service was conceived originally to link up possible COVID trials with the existing 3 European trials. This service is now closed because the call for COVID is closed. But however, in this project, we reviewed we peer reviewed the proposal, and then we noticed that this proposal was more better matched to a European clinical trial on long COVID, which was outside of EASIDORE. So we we put in contact the investigator of this trial with the trial, which is being conducted at European level on long COVID. So this was a service which came to us from Cyprus, which came to us in an area of work where our clinical trials were not operational, but it was possible to link them up with other partners which were working on COVID. So this was, and then I'm giving you an example of a project, a similar project, which was conducted outside of EASIDORE, but it's just to sort of visualize if you require our services, how they would be provided. So this project it came to us from Netherlands, and it was to identify the regulatory requirements for clinical trial application and to develop a summary protocol, including the design, methodology, and implementation. And the support that was provided was that we provided information and advice to the research team and helped them to develop a protocol synopsis, which was taking into consideration all the regulatory requirements in the European countries that they were going to work on, because it was again a trial which was a multinational trial with which was being conducted in 6 countries. So that's it from my side. So David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So Sarah's very elegantly described, the regulatory support that ECRIN can offer. And this is more a bit further down around the clinical trial application. EATRIS provides regulatory support much earlier than that, but it's equally important. I think looking for advice from regulators or regulatory experts should happen early on in your development programs. So before I get into that, maybe just a snapshot of who and what EATRIS is. Well, it's another research infrastructure, because that's what ISIDORE is. It's research infrastructures working together to provide this catalogue of services. We are one for translational medicine. We have 144 academic sites currently across, I believe, 15 countries and growing. Next slide. So our mission is to accelerate the translation of research discoveries into patient benefit. And we do this by supporting, using our capacities and expertise, academia, industry, patients, and policy makers. Next slide. What do we do? Well, like all the RIs, we provide user access to research and expert services. That's what our bread and butter is, to support your development programs. We help develop new research tools, provide education, training, but overall try and improve the conditions for translation. So what are the regulatory support services that we can offer through ISIDORE? Next slide. Okay, so first of all, an open discussion with a regulatory expert to discuss maybe, for example, the right preclinical models to assess the safety of your product. What we really try to do through ISIDORE is at least give the applicant an opportunity to speak to an expert, a simple 1-hour meeting that can really flag some of these early issues. Are you using the right model? Have you addressed other issues like reaching out to a national competent authority and so on? One other area of popularity through ISIDORE is giving feedback and support on the drafting of a target product profile or an IMPD. These are very important regulatory documents which most on the call know all about, and they act as a guideline or a goalpost to your development process. We walk you through that, provide you templates, and answer questions that you may have as you try and populate these documents. Support to apply for scientific advice. What are the right questions? Should I go to the EMA? Should I go to a national competent authority? And so on. So overall, the EATRIS Regulatory Services Support Centre is available to help guide you through this, what we know is a very complex word for a lot of academics, especially for complex and hybrid products for which clear regulatory guidance may not be available. An early assessment of these potential requirements may prevent unnecessary project delays, definitely reduce extra costs, and most importantly, prevent penalties resulting from non-adherence to the legal requirements. Next slide. So again, just to maybe reiterate what are the type of support we can provide: assessment of regulatory requirement for market authorization, scientific advice for preparing an application to the EMA, informal scientific advice with selected national competent authorities for more complex projects, and preclinical and clinical development plan development, such as the target product profile and investigational medicinal product dossier. Next slide. And maybe to give you an example of a type of service which we have come in the door, a particular SME developing COVID-19 therapeutic with a compound, let's call it X. They need to confirm in vitro results of viral load reduction in a clinical setting through a single study to evaluate a single dose of their compound in subjects that have COVID-19. So what do they want from us? What do they need to find out? Is there a safety tox study in animals required with this new formulation before submitting your clinical trial application? Do they need to carry out a dose finding study in healthy volunteers, or can they go directly into patients for the dose finding phase 1 study? Again, these are maybe sound simple questions, but a lot of investigators don't know the answers. So a lot of money, time, and effort can be saved by addressing these immediately in a simple Q&A session with our regulatory support group at EATRIS. Other advice we provided is feedback to specific regulatory questions, such as advice on a scientific advice process and support for drafting an advice brochure. Because as you know, when you go to a scientific advice, you need to put together carefully the questions and what you think are the answers for the regulatory authorities. Having that brochure properly done, properly drafted, will make for a more, let's say, rewarding and more, I suppose, well, a better meeting, for want of another word. Next slide. So immune monitoring, we mentioned earlier, we wanted to give it some daylight in this presentation because it's an important part and often ties in with regulatory as well on certain, potency or tumorigenicity studies that must be done, or immunogenicity studies, I apologize. And we do that through ECRIN as well. And another example of an immune monitoring study that came into us was simply looking at COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness amongst healthcare workers. So this is simply looking at the immune response, like quantification of SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells or cytokines over time, and looking specifically at variants of concerns. So the service required was quantification of specific T cell markers and cytokines in a cohort of people associated with different strains of SARS-CoV-2. We provided this through one of our institutions up in Norway, who looked specifically at T cells using Illumina technology. So there are a number of these type of immune profiling services. Have a look. We have 4 or 5 partners like Eurobioimaging giving imaging aspects to immune monitoring. Take a look and see if it's a fit for your study. Next slide. So again, at the heart and soul of what ECRIN is research infrastructures coming together to provide their expertise. And we have 17 overall. And if you look at all these different infrastructures, the expertise they bring to the table covers the whole pipeline of developing therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines against infectious disease. So the wow factor of ECRIN is you have the ability and the option to tap into all these different expertise through a catalog of specific services that may help your development path. And I really, really strongly recommend you do that. It's a fantastic initiative, so to make use of it. Next slide. Oh, and we should always remember Arena, our coordinators, our commanders-in-chief that do the hard work of putting all this together. They're the European research infrastructure on highly pathogenic agents, and ECRIN wouldn't be ECRIN without their great work. So we're very, very grateful to them for leading us over the last few years and into the next 2 years. Next slide. So again, let's just snapshot, review what we've said. ECRIN and EATRIS can provide regulatory advice to you and support for your clinical trial preparation. There is no cost for this advice and support. And we do it through 4 calls, risk 4 pathogens, respiratory pathogens, vector-borne pathogens, and any pathogen that we've listed that we believe has epidemic potential. Calls are open today. Apply for them today. If there's any questions about it, our emails are also online. If you have a specific question, whether it's a fit for you guys, ask us. We'll be happy to answer that. And I think that's it. Yeah, so on behalf of Sarah, Patricia, and everybody, just thank you very much for listening in. And I think we may have some Q&A. So back to you, Patricia.
Thank you, David. So thank you, all the attendees for being here. And now we'll proceed with the question and answer section. Just let me check the Q&A. Yeah, I have one for one of the attendees, and it says that Borja comes from FIBAO, Public Health System from Andalusia. Will slides be shared? Maybe Martina, I don't know if this answer. Yes, I can answer yes, if we can share the slides. And also this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available also to you. Okay, so thank you for that question. I will go to another that I have one for David. It says, does the regulatory service provide drafting of documents such as the investigational medicinal product dossier, named as IMPD, or is this expected from the applicant?
Yeah, this is a good question because, the drafting of an IMPD is quite an extensive process, and generally it's better if it's owned by the investigators. It's something that goes on over a long period of time. So what we found, the best value we can give an applicant is if they do this themselves, and then we give feedback on the draft, and if necessary, a Q&A session to go through the template. How do you do it? What are they doing wrong? What can we advise you? And it is from the TPP, for example, that you'll identify gaps that will then maybe initiate scientific advice to get the answers to what we can answer. But it's more of a review of the draft, not drafting. This is someone else generally owns this and not us. But it's a good question.
Thank you, David. I have another for Sarah. What are the timelines for receiving ECRIN services?
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for this question. So it depends once we receive your application. It depends on what kind of service it is, whether it's planning, whether it's budget. If it's a protocol review, we can peer review the protocol. And if we have the in-house expertise, it can take 5 to 6 weeks. And if it needs some external expertise, then it might take a bit longer time. So it would really depend on what kind of service you are asking. But the initial contact, as soon as we receive your short application, we are in touch with you within 2 days to get back to you, send you maybe a longer list of questions to have more idea about what kind of research you want to do. But then it can take 5 to 6 weeks if it's a peer review, or if it's more, a budget can maybe take a bit longer, or if it's the planning of the research protocol. It depends on the extent of the service, but ISIDORE is, as we mentioned, the project is running till February 2025. So between now and then, you can apply for our services.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I have another question for David. How can you support applicants specifically through the scientific advice process at EMA?
Okay, yeah, another question. I think I probably alluded to it in the slides, but there are different processes, such as a more informal advice, like an innovation task force of the EMA, or as proper scientific advice. Both come with their own process, list of rules, list of things you have to do. So our job is to walk you through that, familiarize all applicants with the process, which is more suitable at the stage of development they're at. Maybe informal might be enough at this stage, and so on. Also, in order to go through scientific advice, as I mentioned, it's about asking the right questions. And during the Q&A we will have with the applicant, we'll be able to identify these questions. By filling out the TPP, for example, we'll also spot other gaps. That all feeds into what we refer to as the brochure, and then we can help you go through that. So that's an important thing. But I think it's important to say here again that there's no right or wrong questions here when we talk about early regulatory advice. And the whole idea of the support we give through ISIDORE is having an open discussion with you. It may only be an hour, finding out about your project. What are those early red flags? What do you need at this stage in order to advance in a regulatory compliant manner down the development pathway? So we can do that, and we welcome those type of questions and those type of projects. So please do put your applications in, and we'll have a discussion, and we'll see how we can help you.
Many thanks, David. And I have another question for Sarah. As a researcher, can I apply for ECRIN services from a non-European country?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, you can apply worldwide in ISIDORE, but there is a 20% budget limitation for countries which are outside the EU. And the good news is that we still have some of this budget left, so you can really hurry up and apply for this as soon as it's possible. And outside of this, some of our services are limited to our member and observer countries. So it depends on which country you're based in, and you can check the ECRIN website to see if your country is a part of ECRIN member and observer countries. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. If there are no more questions in the Q&A chat, I don't see any new question. if there are no more comments, I will check now the chat. Okay. I think that we can close now, but before saying goodbye, I just want to let you know that we will send you a post-webinar follow-up questionnaire, and we will thank you a lot if you can answer that. It's just for quality control or for in a continuous improvement in our webinars and all the material that we are developing at ECRIN. So thank you very much, all of you, for your participation, for your attention, and looking forward to receive your proposals, or at least your intentions of application for these services that we consider a great opportunity that all the research community has to take advantage of these free services for the users. So thank you again, Sarah, David, Martina, for the organization and participation in this webinar, and looking forward to the next one. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.